Most people hear Harley-Davidson SCAT 2026 and immediately assume it's just another loud muscle bike fantasy with a badge slapped on it. I thought that too at first. But the more I sat with the idea, the more I realized this bike, if Harley really commits, could say a lot about where the brand is mentally, not just mechanically. What surprised me was how the name SCAT itself feels almost rebellious by Harley standards. Harley usually leans into heritage, nostalgia, and legacy names. SCAT sounds raw, short, almost confrontational. That alone made me pause and think, okay, who is this bike actually for? When I compared the SCAT concept to recent Harley launches, I noticed a pattern. Harley has been quietly experimenting with attitude shifts. The Pan America wasn't just an ADV bike, it was Harley proving it could think outside its comfort zone. The Sportster S wasn't about tradition, it was about performance and minimalism. SCAT, to me, feels like the next step in that evolution. Here's the mistake most people make right away. They assume SCAT would be a retro throwback. I don't think that makes sense. Harley already does retro better than anyone. If SCAT exists, it needs to be sharp, aggressive, and almost uncomfortable for longtime purists. I imagine the SCAT as a low, compact, torque-heavy street brawler, not a cruiser you relax on, but a bike that constantly feels like it wants to launch forward. Something closer in spirit to a modern muscle car than a classic Harley tour. What really caught my attention is how Harley might tune the engine. Everyone expects massive displacement, but I think the smarter move would be a slightly smaller, more responsive motor with brutal mid-range. Most people miss this. Power delivery matters more than peak numbers. If SCAT punches hard from 3,000 to 6,000 RPM, it'll feel faster than bikes with bigger spec sheets. Another misconception is weight. Harley has been fighting its own reputation here. If SCAT comes in lighter than expected, even by 40 or 50 pounds, that changes everything. Suddenly, it's not just a Harley with attitude, it's a Harley you'd actually want to throw into corners without overthinking it. I keep asking myself, would Harley risk alienating their core audience with this bike? And honestly, that might be the point. Every brand hits a moment where playing it safe becomes the biggest risk. SCAT feels like Harley testing how far it can push before people stop calling it a Harley at all. Design-wise, I don't think chrome belongs anywhere near this bike. Matte finishes, dark metals, exposed mechanical parts, something that looks unfinished in a deliberate way, almost industrial. Something you'd park outside and glance back at not because it's pretty, but because it looks dangerous. Here's a practical takeaway if you're a potential buyer. If SCAT happens, don't judge it like a cruiser. Ride it like a performance street bike. Most disappointment comes from wrong expectations. Harley bikes shine when you ride them the way they're meant to be ridden, not the way tradition tells you to. I also think Harley would be smart to keep electronics minimal. Traction control, sure. Ride modes, okay, but no screen that feels like a tablet glued to the bars. SCAT should feel mechanical, not digital. Most riders don't say this out loud, but too much tech kills emotional connection. Another thing people overlook is pricing strategy. If Harley prices SCAT too high, it becomes a garage trophy. If they price it aggressively, it becomes a statement. SCAT needs to feel attainable, not exclusive. Otherwise, it loses its edge before the engine even starts. When I compare SCAT to bikes like the Indian FTR or Ducati Diavel, the difference is intention. Those bikes feel engineered to impress spec-hungry riders. SCAT, if done right, should feel engineered to scare you a little, in a good way. I keep thinking about who would actually ride this bike. Not the long-distance tourer crowd, not the vintage collectors. It's for riders who love torque, noise, and presence, but also want something that doesn't feel stuck in the past. Riders who want a Harley without the baggage. Here's another mistake people make, assuming Harley can't change. Brands don't change overnight, but they do pivot when survival demands it. SCAT feels less like a product and more like a signal that Harley still wants to be part of modern performance conversations. If you're watching this and thinking, why not just buy a naked bike from Europe or Japan, that's fair. But emotion isn't rational. Harley wins when it taps into identity, not lap times.
SCAT doesn't need to beat anyone on paper, it just needs to feel unapologetic. One small detail I hope Harley nails is sound. Not loud for the sake of loud, but deep, tight, aggressive. A sound that feels controlled, not sloppy. Most people miss how much sound shapes perceived quality. In the end, my honest take is this. Harley-Davidson SCAT 2026 doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be brave. If Harley plays it safe, SCAT becomes forgettable. If Harley leans into discomfort, controversy, and raw performance, this bike could quietly become one of the most important Harleys in years. And if that happens, I think we'll look back and say this wasn't just a new model, it was a mindset shift.